I begin the speech on the word of the Chief Minister, and I read. I'd like to extend our gratitude to our dear friends from the private sectors, foreign dignitaries, and fellow workers in the Bangsamoro government, and most importantly, to the representative of the United Nations, Philippines, who brought all of us here today. First, welcome to Bangsamoro. I say this because it is our collective efforts over the past few decades that made this bureaucracy possible. We have always been fortunate to have worked with your esteemed organization, from our guerrilla days in the field to the exhausting yet rewarding peace process, to the ratification of the Bangsamoro Organic Law, and now the transition phase of the new bureaucracy. Most of you, if not all, were key players in sharing the Bangsamoro situation to the rest of the world. A significant piece in our peace process, and for that, we will always grateful. With all our shared experiences together, it is true, proper to call this event as the Bangsamoro Peace Forum. For the decades of our struggle and joint efforts, we fortunate to build principles that can stand through the test of time and go beyond the halls of bureaucracy and formalities. Today, we have the opportunity to look back over the years and reflect on certain areas where we can assure that we are still on the right track and continuously committed to our people and a system that is truly reflective of the Bangsamoro's shared, desired, and aspirations. Thank you for the years of your support and belief that one day we can live in peace in the Bangsamoro and we can build a government that we can call our own. Enjoy the rest of the day. And wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And that ends the message of the Chief Minister of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao.
The peace process between the government of the Philippines and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, particularly the process in the implementation of the program for normalization in the Bangsamoro. To recall, normalization is defined in our signed agreements as the process whereby communities can achieve their desired quality of life, which includes the pursuit of sustainable livelihood and political participation within a peaceful, deliberative society. The normalization process is implemented alongside the progress in the political track of the implementation of the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro. As shown, the normalization track keeps up with the progress in the political track, especially now that the Bangsamoro Transition Authority has already been operationalized. To fast-track the implementation of the normalization track, the President issued on April 24, 2019, the Executive Order number 79, prompting the creation of the Inter-Cabinet Cluster Mechanism on Normalization. The ICCMN is co-chaired by Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles and Presidential Advisor on Peace, Reconciliation and Unity, Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. It has the following member agencies from the national government as shown, divided into 4 clusters based on the 4 aspects of normalization, namely security, socio-economic development programs, confidence-building measures, and transitional justice and reconciliation. The ICCMN has already conducted 4 meetings, with its clusters conducting their own meetings to trace out details on the implementation of its aspect of normalization. Shown here are the mechanisms that implement the different aspects of the normalization process. It will be discussed one by one. First are the transitional components of normalization, which include Joint Normalization Committee, the Joint Peace and Security Committee, and the Joint Peace and Security Teams. The JNC undertakes the primary functions of coordinating the normalization process. The JPSC coordinates with command structures of the GPH and MILF on security arrangements and develops policies and operational guidelines for effective partnership of the JPSTs. The JPSC also coordinates security arrangements for activities related to the implementation of the CAB. The JPSTs also are operating units composed of contingents of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Philippine National Police, and the Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Forces of the MILF, the BIAP or the BIAF-MILF. The JPSTs shall work for the maintenance of peace and order and stability of the areas mutually identified by the GPH and the MILF. There will be 300 JPST teams composed of 30 members each, 15 from the GPH with contingents from the AFP and the PNP, and 15 from the BIAF-MILF. From November to December 2018, there were 153 members of the AFP, PNP, and BIAF-MILF who underwent JPST training at the PPSC Training Center, PNP, at the Pro-Arm, Parang, Maguindanao. On August 26 of last year, 219 BIAF-MILF members finished their 26-day basic military training at Camp Lucere Carmen, North Cotabato, as a requirement to their participation in the JPSTs. From October 21 to November 22, 2019, 317 JPST members underwent the second batch of the JPST training. Here are the deployment areas of the JPSTs, which are mutually identified by the GPH and the MILF. 6 of which JPSTs are currently deployed as follows: 1 in Camp Abubakar, 1 in the Operation Center at the DPWH building compound in Cotabato, Awang. 4 teams are deployed with the Independent Decommissioning Body headquarters. On decommissioning, the Independent Decommissioning Body established in 2014 is mandated by the GPH and the MILF to oversee the process of decommissioning of MILF forces and weapons. The IDB also monitors the secured arms storage area where decommissioned weapons are stored. The MILF shall undertake a graduated program for decommissioning of its forces so that they are put beyond use. Decommissioning includes activities aimed at achieving a smooth transition of MILF members to productive civilian life. Based on the Annex on Normalization, the decommissioning of MILF forces and weapons shall be in parallel and commensurate to the implementation of all agreements of the GPH and the MILF. The decommissioning of MILF forces and weapons is done in 4 phases. On June 16, 2015, a ceremonial decommissioning of 145 combatants and 75 high-powered firearms and cruiser weapons of the MILF were conducted. The second phase of decommissioning is currently ongoing, where 30% of MILF combatants and weapons will be decommissioned. This shall be followed by the third phase of decommissioning, which will be held later this year. In 2021 to 2022, the final phase of decommissioning of MILF combatants and weapons will be conducted prior to the signing of the exit agreement between the GPH and the MILF. The second phase of the decommissioning process began on August 26, 2019, and on September 7, 2019, it was formally launched at the old Maguindanao Provincial Capital, Sultan Kudarat, Maguindanao. This was attended by no less than our President, Rodrigo Roa Duterte. As of December 4 last year, there were 8,879 combatants and 1,542 firearms were decommissioned for the second phase and will resume today, February 18, 2020, to process more than 3,000 combatants and 300 plus more firearms. On policing, Section 2, Article 11 of the Republic Act number 11054, or the Bangsamoro Organic Law, provides that the PNP shall create a police regional office in the BARM, headed by a regional director. On September 24, 2019, the National Police Commission, NAPOLCOM, issued a resolution number 2019-634 approving the reorganization and renaming of the PNP Pro-Arm to PNP Pro-Bar. Another dimension under the security aspect is the redeployment of the AFP. Based on the Annex on Normalization, the AFP shall redeploy units and troops from or within the Bangsamoro, consistent with a normal and peaceful life and the progress in the other aspect of normalization. A joint security assessment and inventory of AFP units and troops shall be conducted to avoid a security vacuum in the Bangsamoro. The AFP shall retain installations necessary for a national defense and security. On September 3, 2015, the Office of the President issued Memorandum Circular number 83, creating the National Task Force for the disbandment of private armed groups in the areas of the proposed Bangsamoro and the adjacent regions of Region 9 and Region 12. The NTF DPAGs will be in charge of the policy, planning, and implementation of the program for the disbandment of private armed groups under the security aspect of normalization. Its implementation rules and operational guidelines is currently with the Office of the Executive Secretary for approval. On the second aspect of normalization is the socio-economic development, which is primarily overseen by the Task Force for the Commission Combatants and their communities. The TFDCC is mandated to identify, undertake efforts, coordinate government and non-government partners, and address implementation concerns related to socio-economic and development programs for MILF combatants and their communities. The TFDCC is composed of representatives of the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, and the Department of Interior and Local Government, and on the GPH side, and the MILF on the other side. The delivery of initial socio-economic packages to the 145 decommissioned combatants from the first phase of decommissioning have already been completed. The TFDCC is currently rolling out the enhanced program of interventions and implementation mechanisms for decommissioned combatants under the first and second phase. The enhanced program of interventions for decommissioned combatants include social protection, livelihood or employment assistance, capacity development, and physical infrastructure or land titling. Upon decommissioning, its decommissioned combatants shall receive immediate cash assistance worth 100 pesos and undergo DSWD social welfare intake or profiling. As part of the confidence-building measures between the GPH and the MILF, and as a gesture of goodwill, the parties created the Joint Task Forces on Camps Transformation to assess the needs, plan appropriate programs, and undertake the necessary measures to transform the 6 MILF camps acknowledged in 1999 into a peaceful and productive communities. The Joint Task Force for each of the 6 camps is composed of 2 members, each from the GPH and the MILF, and it's co-chaired each from the GPH and MILF head to the Joint Task Force on Camp Transformations. Shown are the 6 previously acknowledged MILF camps deployed as follows. In Camp Bilal in Lanao provinces, Camp Busra in Lanao del Sur, Camp Abubakar in Maguindanao, Camp Badre in Maguindanao, Camp Rajamuda in North Cotabato and Maguindanao, Camp Omar in Maguindanao. These are some of the strategies to transform the 6 MILF camps: social infrastructure, economic infrastructure, and access to economic opportunities. In 2017, the Joint Task Force on Camp Transformation turned over 3,001 solar kits to individual households and communal facilities in the 6 camps as part of the quick response projects. Capacity development trainings for the JTFCTs and camps-based people's organizations were conducted in 2018. These include trainings on project management and participatory area development. The social preparation process for the implementation of camps transformation program and quick response projects are currently ongoing. 14 people's organizations were organized across the 6 camps to serve as partners in operation and maintenance. The JTFCTs conducted an exposure program and capacity development for MILF front and base commanders on agricultural production from June 24 to July 4, 2019. And on next week, from February 24 to 29, 2020, a similar activity will be conducted to focus on good governance. The JTFCTs also engaged the Bangsamoro Planning and Development Authority for the development of the CAMS Transformation Plan. Starting today until February 20, they will conduct a formulation workshop on the CAMS Transformation Plan. To facilitate the healing of the wounds of conflict and the return to normal life, the GPH shall take immediate steps through amnesty, pardon, and other available processes towards the resolution of cases of persons charged with or convicted of crimes and offenses connected to the armed conflict in Mindanao. And so, the Department of Justice, DOJ, and OPPAP are currently conducting initial coordination and evaluation on the issuance of safe conduct passes, amnesty and pardon for MILF members charged and convicted of crimes and offenses. At present, safe conduct passes have been issued to the 6 MILF leaders and other base commanders. Currently, the OPPAP is processing 16 MILF front and base commanders with various cases. In 2014, the panels created the Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission, or the TJRC. The TJRC is chaired by a Swiss expert with one representative each from the GPH and the MILF as members. The TJRC is mandated to undertake a study and recommend to the panels the appropriate mechanisms to address the legitimate grievances of the Bangsamoro people, correct historical injustices, and address human rights violations. In its main report, the TJRC recommended the creation of the National Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission for the Bangsamoro and TJRCB, as well as actions mostly for government agencies. The TJRC officially turned over its main report to the GPH and MILF panels on February 11, 2016 for their further action. And in February 2017, it submitted its supplementary reports, namely listening process report, the land report dealing with the past and land dispossession, and a technical report with the World Bank and International Organization for Migration entitled Land, Territory, Domain, and Identity. Two major capacity building interventions were also conducted to implement the ICCMN Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Cluster as follows. Training camp on TJR organized and provided by the Independent Working Group on the TJDWP for key members of the ICCMN TJR on 18 to 20 November 2019 in Antipolo City. We also have the capacity building for the AAP's Technical Working Group on TJR that was conducted on 27 to 29 November 2019 in Tagaytay City. These capacity building interventions resulted to an increased understanding and appreciation of the 22 member agencies of the cluster on the transitional justice and dealing with the past framework to ably respond to the Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission recommendations. It also provided an avenue for the mapping of agency programs, and most importantly, these trainings equip them with the necessary knowledge and skills for the formulation of the TJR roadmap of the 90+ recommendations. The iterative TJR road mapping process also served as a strategy to solidify government's position and strengthen its commitment in responding to the TJRC report and its recommendations along the 4 DWP's pillars, namely right to know, right to justice, right to reparation, and guarantee of non-recurrence. On the roadmap formulation, concurrence approval is being sought from the ICCMN and eventually with the Government Implementing Panel. And once approved, it will be presented to the MILF Implementing Panel for its review and eventually its concurrence. The joint approval of the panel's TJR roadmap is critical and shall serve as a guide for the implementation of a TJR program. This is the final slide of my report. Thank you and good morning.
We have the opportunity to discuss updates on the peace process, which is critical for both members of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority, to the government, to the MILF, and of course, to the international community. It is so inspiring to note that a year has already passed since we established the Bangsamoro Transition Authority, shortly after the ratification of the Bangsamoro Organic Law or Republic Act 11054 and the BARM. The creation of the BARM and the appointment of MILF leaders in critical positions in the interim government are a direct result of the peace process between the government of the Philippines and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. The Bangsamoro peace process is now in the transition and implementation phase. Ergo, both parties have to exemplify a high level of trust and confidence with each other, perseverance, resourcefulness, and earnestness to fulfill all obligations stated in the Bangsamoro Organic Law and the signed peace agreements, namely the 2012 Framework Agreement on the Bangsamoro and its 4 annexes and the 2014 Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro. I was requested by the organizers to speak on the normalization process, the cornerstone of the peace implementation phase. According to the Framework Agreement on the Bangsamoro, normalization is the process whereby communities can achieve their desired quality of life, which includes the pursuit of sustainable livelihood and political participation within a peaceful deliberative society. Furthermore, normalization aims to ensure human security in the Bangsamoro, helps build a society that is committed to basic human rights where individuals are free from fear or violence or crime and where long-held traditions and values continue to be honored. In other words, normalization aims to contribute to the creation of a stable, peaceful, just, and prosperous Bangsamoro. In this regard, normalization is composed of 8 substantive elements designed to instigate political, economic, security, and social structural changes needed to remedy past grievances and provide for a more fair and equitable future for the combatants and the Bangsamoro people. The elements are as follows. Policing in the Bangsamoro. Number 2, creation of the transitional components of normalization, namely Joint Normalization Committee, Joint Peace and Security Committee, and Joint Peace and Security Teams. Number 3, confidence-building measures such as pardon and amnesty, as well as specialized programs for the 6 acknowledged camps of the MILF. Number 4, socio-economic development program. Number 5, the commissioning of MILF weapons and combatants and put them beyond use. Number 6, transitional justice and reconciliation program. Number 7, disbandment of private armed groups. And number 8, redeployment of armed forces of the Philippines in the Bangsamoro. Upon close inspection, you will realize that these elements supplement one another. For instance, it would be difficult for any socio-economic intervention to thrive if the security situation on the ground is not improved. In this regard, the role of the International Monitoring Team, or IMT, which, alongside other ceasefire mechanisms, is very much imperative or indispensable up to the signing of the exit agreement. Moreover, confidence in the decommissioning process will falter if illegal private armed groups are still prevalent. In other words, all components must be simultaneously implemented. My esteemed partner from the GPH Peace Implementing Panel, Undersecretary Diciano, presented significant updates on decommissioning and the security aspect of normalization. I now have the privilege to lead the discussion on the socio-economic component, confidence-building measures, or CBM, transitional justice and reconciliation, and normalization trust fund, or BNTF. But you will realize in the course of my presentations that some of those presentations are already touched by my good counterpart or partner in government, and this is good because it supplements each other. Together with the updates on the normalization topics, I believe it is worthwhile to cite essential provisions in the peace agreements and the Bangsamoro Organic Law. Moreover, we must revisit the fundamental principles that have guided this peace process. We should remain consistent with our goal as per the ideals, needs, and aspirations of the Bangsamoro people. At this juncture, I shall now proceed to the core of my presentation this morning. Socioeconomic component. As per the framework agreement on the Bangsamoro Annex on Normalization, the parties agreed to intensify development efforts for rehabilitation, reconstruction, and development on the Bangsamoro, and institute programs to address the needs of BF members, internally displaced persons, and poverty-stricken communities. Therefore, the socioeconomic component of the normalization process is paramount. This intervention shall also instigate the devastating effects of the decades-old armed conflict. More importantly, I would support the meaningful transition of armed combatants to civilian life, wherein they will become productive members of their communities, able to enjoy their political, economic, social, and civil rights. Under the FAP and the CAP, the Philippine government has committed to supporting the relevant socioeconomic packages based on the livelihood needs and skills assessment of the BF members and their families led by the Institute of Bangsamoro Studies. The commissioned combatants will each receive 100 million worth of monetary and non-monetary packages composed of 100,000 pesos cash, and number 2, housing packages equivalent to 500,000, and livelihood and health programs worth 400,000, including PhilHealth, higher education scholarships from the Commission on Higher Education, vocational and professional training from the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, and other interventions. At present, the government has dispensed the cash of 100,000 to the commissioned combatants. On the other hand, we are still awaiting details on the two different components of the socio-economic packages, particularly the housing portion. The timing and phasing of socio-economic interventions are crucial. Delays in providing basic needs could lead to aggravation among the decommissioned combatants, which we hope to prevent. I also mentioned that under Article 14 of the Bangsamoro Organic Law, the national government will also provide a special development fund to the BARM for the rebuilding, rehabilitation, and development of its conflicted affected communities. The special development fund amounts to 50 billion that will be allocated 5 billion per year in the next 10 years after the ratification of the Bangsamoro Organic Law. Program under the SDF can complement development projects under the normalization process. Finally, as part of our monitoring and evaluation efforts, there are plans to conduct an assessment on the current situation of the 145 MILF combatants who underwent the ceremonial decommissioning process in 2015. The result of this evaluation would help improve the next round of decommissioning, especially the delivery and use of socio-economic packages. On conflict building measures, my good partner has already discussed this, but nevertheless, I will still continue to read my presentation. Interrelated to the socio-economic component is the confidence building measures, or CBM. Under the Annex on Normalization, confidence building measures refers to two kinds of interventions. One, the transformation of the 6 MILF previously acknowledged MILF camps into productive communities, and two, facilitating healing and reconciliation through amnesty, pardon, and other applicable processes to resolve the cases of persons charged or connected or convicted with crimes connected to armed conflict. Under camp transformation, the GPS and the MILF Peace Implementing Panels created the Joint Task Force for Camp Transformation by signing its term of reference on February 11, 2016 in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The responsibilities of the Joint Task Force are to assess the needs, plan the appropriate programs, and undertake necessary measures to transform the following 6 acknowledged MILF camps: Camp Abu Bakar as-Siddiq, Camp Bilal in Llano del Norte, Camp Umar in Maguindanao, Camp Rajamuda in North Cotabato, Camp Badr in Maguindanao, Camp Busra in Llano del Sur. The Joint Task Force, composed of representatives from the GPS and MILF, has made strides last year. Allow me to highlight some of the milestones discussed in the 2019 accomplishment report. 1. The conduct of the exposure program and initial camps planning, where 79 representatives from the MILF units and committees, such as peace mechanism, political committees, base and front commanders, Bangsamoro Islamic Auxiliary, Bangsamoro Islamic Women's Auxiliary Corps, and the Social Welfare Committee were coached on agricultural technology and farming innovation. Number 2, the GTFCT extended a partnership with the Bangsamoro Planning and Development Authority, or BPDA BARM, to formulate the camp's transformation plan. A series of roundtable discussions and consultations were conducted between September to December 2019 to support this planning process. These were attended by representatives from the BPDA, Mindanao Development Authority, National Economic Development Authority, and MILF front and base commanders across 6 MILF camps. Number 3, through the efforts of the Joint Task Force on Camp Transformation and the Task Force for Decommissioned Combatants and their communities, 4,859 beneficiaries from Camp Abu Bakar, Badr, Umar, Rajamuda, and Darapanan avail the tulong panghanap buhay sa ating disadvantaged displaced workers, or TUPAD, through Dole Region 12. This program provided emergency employment for the displaced workers for a period of 30 working days starting November 26, 2019 to December 30, 2019. To support camp transformation and normalization in general, OPPAP signed Memorandum of Agreement with the following agencies for the implementation of respective programs. 1. Department of Social Welfare and Development, Socioeconomic Program for Normalization in the Bangsamoro. 2. Signing of a Technical Education Skills and Development Authority that is about technical education and skills development program for the Bangsamoro. Number 3, Department of Labor and Employment, Integrated Livelihood and Emergency Employment Program for the Bangsamoro. And number 4, Commission on Higher Education and the Bar Ministry of Basic Higher and Technical Education for the 10 agreements on higher education in the Bangsamoro. On this point, I signed a memorandum of understanding with CHED and OPPAP last October 30, 2019. Under the MOU, CHED, OPPAP, and the Education Ministry will coordinate with the relevant agencies to ensure the inclusion of underprivileged BARM students, the children of the Commission MILF combatants, and selected beneficiaries from the MILF 6 MILF camps in appropriate education program. Meanwhile, we are awaiting for the approval and implementation of quick response projects under the Mindanao Trust Fund Reconstruction and Development Project Phase 2 and the United Nations Development Program Support to Peace Building and Normalization Programs. Let me now move on the area of pardon and amnesty. As mentioned earlier, pardon and amnesty shall help facilitate the healing process where combatants accused or convicted of crimes connected to the armed struggle will have a chance to have a healthy and productive life. I want to emphasize that amnesty and pardon are two different things. Amnesty is defined as a legal measure that ends all investigations and persecution against its beneficiaries. In contrast, a pardon revokes or suspends a conviction after a sentence has been handed down by a court of law. In other words, a pardon can only be given if the recipient was convicted of a crime. Last November 2019, the MILF Peace Implementing Panel submitted a list of MILF members currently in custody and with pending cases to the GPH Peace Panel. Subsequently, OPPAP, through its Office of Legal Affairs, examined the document. After the OPPAP coordinated the Department of Justice, the government sent us a formal letter stating that concerned MILF members can apply for the options made available by the Presidential Committee on Bail, Recognizance, and Pardon, or PCB-REP. OPPAP, through the GPS Peace Implementing Panel, expressed willingness to facilitate the process with the DOH and the PCB-REP. The government has also assured the MILF that going through the PCB-REP is just one modality and available to us. Our comrades can still avail of the amnesty once a presidential proclamation of amnesty is in effect. We already submitted a draft proclamation to the GPH Peace Panel, which was adopted. However, this process is overtaken by current events and authorities arrested some of our MILF members. For instance, one member of the MILF CCCH support staff was arrested recently by government operatives. I hope this issue will be resolved soon, and I want to appeal to our partners in government to expedite the provision of amnesty. On transitional justice and reconciliation, let us now proceed to transitional justice and reconciliation, another critical component of the normalization process. Generally speaking, transitional justice aims to establish the truth, acknowledge victim sufferings, make perpetrators liable, provide reparation for past injustices, prevent future wrongs, and promote healing and reconciliation. Addressing historical grievances of the Bangsamoro people is integral to peace, justice, and nation building. The GPH and MILF Peace Panels therefore commissioned a report to identify measures that would feed into a comprehensive program on transitional justice in the Bangsamoro. The main transitional justice and reconciliation report was submitted to the GPH and MILF Peace Panels last December 9, 2015, and outlines 90 recommendations for the parties' consideration. We have had many consultations and workshops to discuss the way forward. Despite creating modalities to develop a transitional justice and reconciliation program, there has been little progress in this area. On the government side, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte signed Executive Order number 79, dated April 24, 2019, creating the Inter-Cabinet Cluster Mechanism on Normalization, or ICCMN. One of the areas to be tackled by the body is on transitional justice and reconciliation. I understand that the ICCMN has developed a roadmap for DGR based on the report above by the Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission, and fortunately, we have with us the chair of the TGRC, Madam Mubliker. On April 29, 2019, the GPS and MILF Peace Implementing Panels signed a joint statement summarizing the result of the special meeting conducted in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. In the said statement, the parties agreed to intensify efforts on normalization, including transitional justice and reconciliation. Subsequently, the panel chairs also signed the terms of reference of the GPH MILF Technical Working Group on Transitional Justice and Reconciliation on August 16, 2019 in Cotabato City. The MILF has already identified 3 individuals who will be part of this TWG. However, the government has not yet named theirs. But I do see a silver lining. Representatives from the GPS and MILF representatives attended a brainstorming session heard yesterday to identify possible next steps towards a joint roadmap on transitional justice and reconciliation. I want to thank the Swiss federal government for supporting this activity, especially Ambassador Alain Gassen and Madam Mubliker, who are with us this morning. Meanwhile, the Bangsamoro Interim Parliament adopted BTA Resolution number 56, or the resolution calling for the creation of the Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao on January 24, 2020. As the name suggests, this body only covers the Bangsamoro region. It is in no way a substitute to the creation of a National Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Board for the Bangsamoro and other government-led program as recommended by the main TGR report. We approve this resolution in the hopes that a formal structure with a clear mandate and effectively engage the national government for the acknowledgement of past grievances affecting reparations and institutional reform, and ultimately forging healing and reconciliation. Finally, let us look at the Bangsamoro Normalization Trust Fund, or BNTF. As per the annex on normalization, the GPS and MILF recognize the need to attract multi-donor country support to the normalization to augment existing government resources. Indeed, undoing decades of inequality and poverty and creating an environment similar to a time before the start of the armed conflict will require an immense volume of resources. Hence, the parties resolved to create a trust fund wherein the budget for normalization will be released with efficiency, transparency, and accountability. On December 17, 2017, the GPS and MILF panels signed the guidelines for the operationalization of the Bangsamoro Normalization Trust Fund. The World Bank, as the fund manager or fund administrator, presented to the Joint Implementing Panels the design of the BNTF on August 16, 2019 in Cotabato City. The BNTF was then launched at the World Bank office in Makati on October 11, 2019, wherein Australia expressed definite interest in putting money into the BNTF. The European Union and Japan have also expressed interest in the trust fund. Unfortunately, setting up the Bangsamoro Normalization Trust Fund is experiencing delays. According to the GPH Peace Panel, the Department of Finance must first endorse a Special Presidential Authority or SPA to Malacanang before the creation of a multi-donor trust fund. The SPA will enable OPPAP to sign a Memorandum of Understanding with the World Bank to correctly set up the trust fund and receive pledges from donors. I understand the establishment of a trust fund is subjected to an intricate policies. However, the BNTF in particular is critical not only to the normalization but to the distribution of peace dividends and initiating sustainable development in conflict-affected communities. I hope by the time the Office of the President approves the SPA and the Trust Fund organized, our peace partners are still willing and able to provide support. This is our appeal. Before I end my presentation, I want to highlight how the peace processes test our ability to carry out necessary but unpopular modification to the political status quo and jumpstart the healing and rehabilitation process in all conflict-affected communities. Within the 50 years of struggling to achieve self-determination and the 20 years of finding a peaceful solution to the Bangsamoro people, we have experienced both success and failure. We often say failure is not an option, but it is a prerequisite to success. Given the scope of normalization and the resources required to ensure its success, it seems an almost impossible task. Therefore, normalization requires political will, a problem-solving mindset, respect of the peace process architecture, coordination among related normalization mechanisms, proper utilization of allocated resources, both from government coffers and from development partners, and access to relevant expertise and technical advice. Moreover, donor coordination and cooperation will be crucial this year, especially now that the normalization process is moving forward. As more peace-building and development actors are becoming visible on the ground, we will need to be more unified efforts, our shared purpose and objectives, and rigorously avoid any redundancy or inconsistencies. No doubt, we find value in the assistance extended by international experts and consultants as part of our learning curve. However, I would like to emphasize that any program should not supplant our strategies and approaches. We will make the final decision or design for our people. Maraming salamat. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.